Hi, everyone. Welcome to Waste 360's Nothing Wasted podcast. On every episode, we invite the most interesting people in waste, recycling, and organics to sit down with us and chat candidly about their thoughts, their work, this unique industry, and so much more. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This week's podcast is a session straight from sustainability talks at the past WasteExpo, and I think you're going to love it. It's all about chasing transparency around carbon labeling, sort of a newfound idea, and it definitely has legs and something that we want to bring to the forefront. And this session does a great job of that. You're going to learn as these speakers dig into why carbon labels matter, their importance in guiding buying decisions, and really the science and data behind them. So you'll hear from Kristin Kinder from Wastequip, Sandra Noonan, Chief Sustainability Officer of Just Salad, and Mike Rosen, Managing Principal of PRR, who had his hand in labels that you will recognize and see on a daily basis. So enjoy the conversation. It's really thought-provoking, and it really is sort of a part one in this and where we can all be headed going forward. So enjoy and let us know what you think.
So today we're here to talk about carbon labeling, which is putting the emissions of the product on the product. We are going to get into that in just a minute, but before we do, I want to tell you why this matters to you. If you are from a recycler, can you imagine a world where the world would know the value of your product, your bales, based on the avoided emissions? If you're part of a municipality, what if you could buy products that are environmentally friendly and know they're actually environmentally friendly quickly and easily? For the national haulers that are in the room, if you're trying to measure your Scope 3 emissions, what if you could work with suppliers who already knew the carbon footprint of their products? And if you're a brand or manufacturer, what if you already knew the carbon footprint of your products so that you could make products that are less impactful? And if I have missed you, you all said you've bought something before, and this presentation is for people who buy things. So I used to say that everything we do creates waste, and that's true, but perhaps even more true is that everything we do has a carbon footprint. So the shoes you wear to go on your walk, the bath and beauty products, the ice cream that's your favorite dessert at night, even sending an email. A freaking email has a carbon footprint. Carbon dioxide is one of the main reasons that life exists on Earth. It's a greenhouse gas, so it warms the planet so that we can all survive. But it's also a byproduct of industrial activities. Too much of it in our atmosphere is causing our planet to warm and altering the natural world that we depend on. I should probably introduce myself. I'm Kristin Kinder with Wastequip. We manufacture equipment for the waste industry. You've probably seen our toter carts around the show. We also do steel dumpsters, compactors, and even trucks. They hired me to build our internal sustainability program, but more important, to provide an unbiased perspective on waste and sustainability for the company as well as the industry. Perhaps what most qualifies me for this job is that I am that person who will spend 40 hours researching a rug, to make sure that it meets my values for people and our planet. But most people won't. A carbon label is just listing the amount of carbon emitted in the raw materials, the manufacturing, the use, and the end life of a product on the product itself so the buyer can see it easily. There are lots of environmental impacts in the world, and you can label lots of things. I mean, the number of eco certifications is about 450 and counting. Today, our discussion will cover the concept of product transparency in general, but we're focusing on carbon because it's the most important thing we can be measuring and one of the most important links to climate change. The concept of labeling really isn't new. You see them every day when you go buy a car, maybe that's not every day, on your appliances at home, at the grocery store. We're used to seeing labels to guide our buying decisions. I've touched on why carbon labeling should matter to you, but I want to take a step back and talk about why it matters in a broader sense. Number one, every year, transparency becomes more embedded in business. That's because it's linked to business performance. And we know that destroying the planet and harming communities affects all of our ability to do business in the future. In addition to transparency being the right thing to do, consumers today have an unprecedented ability to be educated on the products and the brands that they buy from. So if a manufacturer doesn't provide this information for them, somebody else probably will. From a business-to-business perspective, many companies have been transparent about their Scope 1 and 2 emissions. Those are the emissions of their direct operations. But many are beginning to think about their Scope 3, which is everything else, including their supply chain. Here are just a few examples from food and beverage. These are all companies that have set science-based targets, which is the most rigorous protocol you can use to set a target, for Scope 3 emissions to reduce their Scope 3 emissions. They will start to care more about the carbon footprint of the products in their supply chain. In our industry, I was so pleased to see that Waste Management already publishes their Scope 3 emissions, and I expect that trend will continue. Second, we keep telling consumers to vote with their dollars, but buying products based on incomplete or inconsistent information is like voting for politicians when you don't actually know what they believe in. Oh wait, I guess that might happen all the time. If you give people good information, usually they will make a good decision. Consumers want to buy products that are better for people and our planet. Lots of studies are out there on this. I found one in particular that really got to the behavior of consumers. NYU researched what consumers actually do, not what they say they believe, but what their actual behavior when it comes to buying sustainability. They analyzed the barcodes at retail checkout for more than 70,000 products from 2013 to 2018, and they found that sales for consumer packaged goods that were marketed with sustainability on them, on the package, grew by almost a third. Not only do consumers value what they believe are sustainable products, they also want to know the carbon footprint of the products they're buying. Carbon Trust surveyed 10,000 consumers across Europe, the UK, and the United States, and they found that 2/3 support labeling carbon on products. Now, if you focus on just the consumer response, that's really only part of the value picture. I always hear the question, is solving climate change the responsibility of individuals or of systems, industries, and companies? And the answer we know is both, but carbon labeling is probably one of the most powerful ways to bring consumers and industries together. Anyone in the audience eat trans fat? This isn't talked about much, but labeling provides the major market shifts that businesses needed. And this trans fat is a great example of this. When the FDA learned that trans fat was directly responsible for heart attacks and deaths in the United States, they announced an intention to label trans fats on products. The industry complained that there really wasn't an effective alternative. They'd been using trans fats for at least 100 years. But at the same time, they doubled down on their research and innovation. And by the time the FDA's requirement actually came out, most of them were labeling their products trans fat free, very proudly. And today, trans fats are virtually non-existent. Another example, in the early 2000s, SUVs were the source of rollover accidents, so much so that Congress wanted to do something. They set a rating system, regulated rating system for SUVs where 5 stars was the safest. The first year, all but one model had 1 or 2 stars. By just 4 years later, that completely inverted. Almost every model had 4 stars. In both examples, nobody regulated standards or products. They simply regulated transparency. This allows for market creativity and market experts to solve the problem with innovation and healthy competition. Carbon labeling is showing up in many industries that are consumer-facing, like food and beverage, consumer products, and textiles. And again, the auto industry is required to report the fuel emissions related to fuel consumption as well. Many of the companies that you see on this list were founded fairly recently with a sustainability focus, but major companies with 100-year histories are also committing to labeling their products. And many of them are coming together to even create industry standards. Carbon labels, I want to just give you a rundown of what really are the important ingredients in a carbon label. It really comes down to just 2 things: scientific data and clear communication. The FTC doesn't, well, actually nobody regulates labels, but the FTC's really only guidance is that companies need to be clear about their methodology. So a good carbon label, this is probably a little small, but you can see at the top, there's the carbon emissions score. And then down below, there's a sentence that says, for more information on what we did, use this QR code. The gold standard is third-party certification, although that's by no means required. Companies are doing both. And labels should also be present at the right time in the buying process. So yes, on the product, but often online where consumers are researching before they buy. So now that you've passed Carbon Labeling 101, I would love to introduce our panelists. As the Chief Sustainability Officer at Just Salad, Sandra Noonan was named one of the most influential women in food service by Nation's Restaurant News last year. In addition to launching one of the first reusable bowl programs, which I'm wondering if we should invite her back another time to talk about that, she and her Just Salad team created the first carbon labels of a fast casual restaurant. She's a real warrior for doing the right thing. Just Google her, I encourage you to. You'll find article after article where she's quoted for helping make the world a better place. We brought Mike Rosen out of retirement for this special event. As the managing principal at PRR, a communications firm ranked in the top 100 in the US, he has decades of experience working with companies from Nike to Starbucks, as well as the EPA and CDC. He helped introduce and build the fuel economy label, which is on every car sold in America, has also worked on Energy Star and WaterSense. He has such a deep knowledge of transformations in markets and behavior that I'm often telling him we're really lucky he chooses to use his power for good, because otherwise we would all be in trouble. And I want to let you in on a little secret. Really, the key to a great presentation is in the perspectives you invite to the conversation. We are so lucky to have both of them here. Sandra brings experience from a company that is really doing all of the work, the full process to label their products, and is doing so voluntarily. And Mike's career has spanned major market transformations for the better, and most of those were motivated through regulation. So we have very diverse perspectives here. So please welcome them. So since we started asking you some rapid fire questions, I thought it was only fair to ask that of our panelists. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions, you don't know what they are, and your job is just say whatever comes to mind first. So the first one, where is your happy place?
Central Park. I live in New York.
Okay.
Africa.
Africa, wow, okay. Wish we could go into depth on both of those, but we're gonna keep going. What do you think is the biggest part of your personal carbon footprint?
Travel.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you name an activity that does not have a carbon footprint?
Walking without clothes.
Cement, grass.
Yeah.
All right, naked walking, okay.
I second that.
All right. Have you ever wish cycled?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Still do, but sparingly, hopefully.
Yeah.
You're guilty as well, Mike? Okay, what's more important, innovation or behavior change? If you had to pick one.
I'm going to go with behavior change because it drives innovation.
Spoken like a true marketer.
Yeah, behavior change.
Okay, and then what gives you hope about our future?
Good businesses.
Years of experiencing people wanting to do the right thing and then making good decisions based on good information.
All right, so the following questions you can answer. Take a little more time to think about. So we'll start off just in your own words. We've talked a lot already about why carbon labels matter, but what do you think we should know? Why do carbon labels matter?
Sure, so what we're looking at here is Just Salad's carbon labeling initiative. So on the right, Just Salad introduced a carbon label in 2020 during Climate Week, and we measured the cradle to grave emissions of every ingredient on our menu. And then we display that as a carbon label. The reason it's shifting from a price to a carbon label here is that we then do marketing promotions to incentivize our customers to choose the salads with the lowest carbon footprints. So this was like a promotion where the salad was 0.68 kilograms of CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalent, and we ran a promotion where we said we're gonna slash the price to mirror that carbon footprint. So you got a salad for $6.80. That was our most popular promotion of the year. And then on the left, this is related to our carbon labeling for sure. This is our signature reusable bowl program. It keeps about 3 tons of waste out of landfills annually, and after 2 uses, it saves way more carbon emissions than a disposable container. So this is also embedded in the footprint of a salad, and there's a lot that goes into that, so I will not go into that now. But finally, the QR code here, I always put on presentations because it links to justsalad.com/carbon label, where you can learn more about our process. So yeah, that's the short version of it.
Mike, do you want to chime in on why carbon labels matter?
And I've said it, you said it once and I'll say it, that I think people make good decisions based on good information. And on a very selfish level, this is my favorite planet. I like to inhale. And carbon is sort of the biggest threat. And we make decisions based on things that are important to us. And I think we just have to raise the volume on this one.
So, Sandra, you talked a little bit about the program that you've built, but I think it's a really great story why you built it and kind of what started that. So tell us a little more about that.
Sure. So Just Salad is a fast casual restaurant chain with 50 units, primarily in New York, Chicago, Florida, and Pennsylvania. And our mission is to make everyday health and sustainability possible, and we take that really literally. So we want the customer to walk in and achieve everyday health and sustainability, and we define everyday sustainability as lowering one's carbon footprint and waste footprint. So we were thinking about ways to talk about the connection between food and climate with our customers. 26% or more, the estimate varies, but more than a quarter, let's say, of the world's global anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions are caused by the food system. And our thesis was that the customer doesn't know that. It's not something that's embedded in our consumer culture, like, at all. And I think that the discussion around eating sustainably was a little bit too kind of stuck in the discussion of eating locally, which is wonderful. Like, we are big proponents of eating locally, but it's not enough to lower the carbon footprint of the food system to within an acceptable and safe boundary. We need to get much more literate as a culture on the carbon footprint of what we eat. That was our thesis. So we said, funny that you can consult a calorie label at a grocery store and make a decision for your health whether you want to purchase that food or not. Or I can, in New York City at least, I can look at a menu board and go, that salad or that item is 400 calories. Do I want that today? Do I not? Maybe I want less, maybe I want more. So why can we not make similar decisions about our purchasing behaviors based on an existential threat, which is climate change? If you care about the planet and you want to consume in a way that is aligned with science and just being climate conscious, why isn't there a label for that? So that was how we started down the road of carbon labeling. We said, if there's a nutrition label, there should be a carbon label. So our mobile app, which is shown here very deliberately, you see the calories of the salad. So this is our Earth Bowl. And next to the calories, the 450 calories, you see 0.31 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. And we don't expect the consumer to understand what that means. We do it anyway because we want to move towards a world where there is some carbon literacy. So if you tap on that 0.31 kilograms, you see a little pop-up explaining this is the carbon footprint of your meal, including the dressing. For comparison's sake, the carbon footprint of a quarter pound beef patty is 3.75. So we provide a reference food that everyone knows. Everyone knows what a beef patty is. So it kind of helps you benchmark. And then on our menu boards in our stores, it's maybe a little hard to see, but under the ingredients list, you have the Earth icon and the carbon label for these salads. And that's how we present it today.
The part that really stood out to me was that in your world, most companies that cared about sustainability, they focused on food miles. And, I think when you and I talked, it was looking to dispel or prove that food miles are the most important environmental impact of the food. And I thought it was really interesting that you wanted to, really delve into if that's true. And I think we often report out what we can measure because we can measure it, not necessarily because it's the whole story.
I wish it were true that food miles were the primary factor in an item's carbon footprint, or in a food item's carbon footprint, but sadly it's not true. There's a lot of academic data on this, and it's generally about 10% of your meal's carbon footprint has to do with food miles, how far or close it is to where you ultimately consume it. The rest is whether it's meat, whether it's dairy, the agricultural processes. So it totally changes when you do that analysis, how you think about eating sustainably and what that means.
Yeah. So, Mike, carbon labeling, we've talked about, is really about building consumer trust, and accurate science with clear communication are the most important ingredients for that. But what do consumers really need to increase their trust in the product and the company or industry behind them?
Trust is the big word, right? And I'm amazed how 3 simple little steps that companies and organizations tend to miss up. One is put your house in order. Don't say you can do it until you can do it. So make sure that your promise is something that you can uphold. Second is be consistent. I'm amazed how many organizations are comfortable with an evaluation of sometimes, usually, or always. Doesn't seem good to me. And third, we all learned this a long time ago. Don't lie. Hello, Volkswagen. And I'll give you a fourth one for free, that if you screw up, own it, fix it, and then prevent it from happening again. We have to build trust. And if you think about in this country, think about any category you want of organizations that you used to trust or individuals you used to trust, and they let us down. And so there are very few white hats anymore in this country, because every time we put our faith somewhere, we get disappointed. So trust, the bar is really low right now, but trust is where it is. And if we do those things, don't make promises that you can't keep. Be consistent in delivering on your promise. Don't lie. And if you screw up, fix it. And then the public will respond.
And along with, I guess, so building that trust and having the information out there with a label, how do we guide consumers to make the right choices? So some of this, I think, is in the literacy, but also in just how we encourage that shift once a label is out in the world.
The fuel economy label hadn't been revised in 20 years. So we didn't now just have gas cars. We had hybrid cars, we had plug-in hybrid cars, we had all electric cars, we had alternative fuel cars. And the public needed to know not only what does that mean in terms of different things, but how do I compare them, right? How do I make a choice across these technologies? So this is huge research. Thousands and thousands of people were involved in this. So we asked, what is your buying decision? What's important to you in a car? What kinds of information do you want? In what order do you want it? How big do you want it compared to the other information? What colors do you like? Do you like bar graphs? Do you like round graphs? This thing was, what colors to different cultures mean different things. So we analyzed the hell out of this thing. And then there's also legislated things that have to be on this label. And this is what research provided. This is what's on every new car in the country. And it does all those things, right? You can compare, it tells you what the carbon output. We're also trying to teach the country it's not miles per gallon, but gallons per 100 miles, which is actually more accurate. And we can talk about that another time, because you have to help people make a good decision, and that kind of information can be confusing. But what we were talking about before is it has to be simple. First, it has to be reliable. Can I trust this, right? Then second, it has to be easy to understand. And three, help me make a decision that I can compare. I did this, and I think it sucks. The next slide is what we recommended to EPA. That, in my opinion, does everything I just said. It is easy to see, where does this vehicle compare to all other vehicles, regardless of fuel type? How does this compare, going through the same kind of filters? Then, as little as possible, there's the information that the law requires on it. And then here is a barcode and a website if you want more information. Because you should be able to get more information if you want it. But if you understand your own personal car buying experience, by the time you get to the lot and you're looking at that label, that's a hard time to turn somebody's attention. So this kind of a label being used in advance would, and on the car itself, would have made a huge difference. So I think those are the key factors, right? It's got to be reliable information. It's got to be easy to consume. It's got to help me make comparisons. And then if I want more, make it easy for me to get that. And it has to be reliable. Don't lie. Have I said that before? Don't lie.
Sandra, you've also had some really interesting approaches at Just Salad to get people interested in learning about their carbon footprint. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so we agree, you have to contextualize the information. Maybe the next slide is better for this one, but displaying a number in units that our society just doesn't talk about yet is not going to do much. So we created a new dietary filter in our online ordering site and in our app. So today you can go in there, and if you want to eat vegetarian or keto. You can filter by your lifestyle and your diet. We added a new filter called climatarian. So if you want to eat because you want to have the lowest carbon footprint and you're really concerned about climate change, that's your prerogative, and you should be able to do that the same way if you want to eat keto. And so that filter, when you tap climatarian, it will show you the items on our menu that are the absolute lowest carbon footprint. So it's about curating this number means so little, you have to curate it into a filter, a diet, or a menu that people understand. And that's our initial gambit at this. I mean, it's such a new field that we're going to certainly change our approach in the future.
One other thing that I thought was really interesting is that all the options are still available to the customer, but you've replaced some of the high carbon items with, as a default, maybe something that might have a lower footprint, where you ask for you have to ask for the substitution. Have you, I guess, anything to add on that?
Yeah, we've defaulted. So defaults are everything. Defaults, when defaults in the food industry are so critical. Like when you order from Grubhub or Uber Eats and you get plastic utensils by default, that's a default that then creates tons of downstream waste that's unnecessary. So I appreciate your question on defaults. And in food and eating, it's up to us as a company to subtly shift defaults to achieve our company's mission. So for example, the Chipotle Cowboy is a menu item that for years had real chicken in it. And today the default, you can still get your real chicken if you want it, but the default is plant-based chicken from a company called Daring. So. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's such an innovative approach to slowly guide, keep people comfortable with what they know, but also guide them toward a new way of thinking about it. So I think you've done a commendable job.
If I could add too, I think it's important to understand it's a human process, right? And the first question that's going to, no matter what we're talking about, regardless of the subject, what's in it for me, right? And people buy benefits, they don't buy features. So somewhere in their decision process, we make emotional decisions, and then we're really good at rationalizing. So 97% of our decisions are emotional, and then we rationalize into our decisions. And there are certain things in the decision process that happen in order. So I am willing to bet there are people who walk in to buy their salad with, I have high cholesterol, I have to make a decision. I have high blood pressure. I have to make a decision based on that. I need to dump 120 pounds. I need to make a decision based on that. And so in that case, health might trump carbon, right? So what we have to try to do, sometimes you can cut in line. There are some decisions where you get to cut in line and make a benefit that is stronger than their previous decision processes. And in some cases, at least, can I get into the second place, right?
Absolutely. And we're going to shift just a couple degrees to talking about the benefits of labeling for industries and businesses themselves, because that's something I think deserves a lot of sunlight. So I guess, Sandra, you were the first in your industry to launch labels, but a few other companies have followed fairly quickly. Tell us, how has that evolved, and where do you see your industry going on the labeling topic?
Yeah, shortly after we launched our carbon labeled menu and our climatarian dietary filter, we saw some very major chains do similar things. Clearly they'd been working on it for a long time, just like us. And I think the one example is Panera has launched a Cool Foods label on their menu that identifies their lowest carbon footprint items, and we applaud that. Today we get calls from all over, other food chains, meal kit companies, companies just in the food industry, saying, we want a carbon label, how do we do this? And I think what needs to happen now is a lot of things need to happen, but some standardization needs to occur, or just third-party verification where the consumer is. By the way, while Kristin's dealing with technology, that sneaker is an Allbirds sneaker, I believe.
Yes.
Allbirds, the shoe company, carbon labels their shoes. And we were really inspired by their approach as well. So it's really crossing industries now.
Yeah, well, so I just wanted to show right now, these are some of the leaders in carbon labeling in the food industry, and they all use different methodologies and different, honestly, even different metrics. So it's, that conversation I think is an incredibly important one. And going to the shoe, I think is also, when we're talking about how businesses and industries are approaching this was a collaboration with Adidas and Allbirds. They set a common goal together, which I think is fairly unprecedented. We throw that word around a lot now, but I think it's truly unprecedented. Mike, I guess tell us, you've witnessed and been part of so many market shifts and transformations. I guess tell us a little more about how valuable industry standards can be.
Well, I think your last slide demonstrates it, that unless there's consistency and something I can trust on, it's just noise. And one of the things that I think works so well with Energy Star, you go to Dell or any of these product people who, or Apple, and these products are beautiful and they're clean. And you come up and say, what you really need to do is put this environmental logo on this product. And it's like, let alone logo wars. How many different logos am I going to put on it because of all the different things that my product has? That's just wrong. It doesn't help the manufacturer. It doesn't help the consumer. So it needs to be something that the public can trust. It needs to be something that is important to them. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be so Energy Star, I think, is a perfect example of that. There was a push-pull that had to take place at the same time. Consumers had to say, I need a way to tell the difference, and the industry needed to say, I need a competitive advantage. And then Energy Star also put sort of a standard that unless you're in the top category, you don't get to display the logo. So the consumer knew that even though other people might be, these are the best, this is the highest category. And I think that worked as a way to do it. But logo wars is don't even bother. Things I will never hear from anybody in this room. Rosen, we have all the money and all the time we need to make this problem go away. It's not going to happen. So the only tools we have is to work together and to do it right.
So this has gone so fast for me. We're close to wrapping up. Do either of you have any concluding thoughts that we didn't get to touch on?
Let's do it again.
I'm with you. I'm on your team for that one. Sandra?
I think maybe the slide where you have the system boundaries is useful. So these are all the inputs to a carbon label.
We can show the slide.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
These are all the inputs to a carbon label. We look at the carbon emissions associated with the complete supply chain of the food you're eating, from the time it's grown to packaged to distributed to stored to cooked to thrown away. Every part of the food life cycle has a carbon footprint. And so, to Mike's point, standardization in labels is going to be really important. The challenge with carbon labeling right now is the complexity of the inputs that go in, and finding a data provider that can set the stage for that standardization. So I would just say, we're in super early days on carbon labeling, and today it's a good tool for a brand like Just Salad to guide customers within their own ecosystem, their own menu to the lower footprint items, but it's hard to compare them to another brands for sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to share, I guess, my Jerry Springer final thought. We all agreed at the beginning of this that corporate America can make the world a better place. How many of you believe that your company could do more? At Wastequip, I'm really excited to share that we have studied the carbon footprint of our toter carts. Our next step is turning that into a label, and we truly welcome industry discussion on how to do this together, because it will be so much more powerful that way. So come find me. We're already scheming on a session for next WasteExpo next year This year was about chasing transparency. I think it should be something like defining transparency. So Mike, I am very much on your page that we should do this again. And I think we have time for maybe one enthusiastic question, and we can be available after, during lunch and everything as well.
So first of all, thank you for the presentation. Very interesting topic. Excuse me. I'm Ken Jackson with True Manufacturing, and I was just curious how you view carbon labeling different than an environmental product declaration, or an EPD.
EPDs help guide our purchasing decisions on like capital goods. So when we're purchasing like flooring or rugs or carpeting. I think an EPD is, I think of that as something that a purchaser of capital goods is using, and they're really hard. They're not hard to read, but they're quite arcane. Okay. Yes, they're pretty hard to read. So a carbon label distills a huge magnitude of environmental information into one number, and so I think of it much more as like the equivalent of a nutrition or calorie label. It's in one glance. In the future, I would hope that a carbon label would make sense to the consumer. So I think that's the way I think about it.
Just in terms of the thought process, it is a moving target, and so that's why I do like the idea of coming up with labels that sort of can move with the target. But it has to be based on science, and people have to have trust in it and understand what the inputs are, so that as they're making those kinds of decisions, and depending on their decision-making process, not all of the inputs are necessarily equal to them, and they need to be able to adjust based on that and course correct based on that. But I really hate when we have this. It doesn't serve any of us well when we have all these different kind of labels with different kind of inputs, or people making up their own label that say, no, trust me, use our product or our service and you'll live forever, you'll be beautiful, and you can jump higher. Trust us, I got a label.
All right, well, I guess we'll end on that.
Yeah, right.
Jumping higher. So we'll see you hopefully again next year to talk more about how we can define transparency in the waste industry. And thank you both so much for being here. I hope this is not the last we get to do something like this.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.